So, what I would like to do today, and possibly also next week, because I don't think we'll manage to do it all in one class, is first to look at the mobile options. So this is the website, the one-page website that we created last week, and we want to look at how to customize this website for mobile views, and in general how to work with mobile devices. And then we will actually start a new website from scratch again, right? And this time we'll use Elementor, but we will also use a theme that comes with different tools, and we will add some plugins to create quickly a fully functioning website with features such as a product catalog. So basically an online shop with possibility of payment, shipping, and so on, right? So we want to create this basic business website with all the functionality, and you will see how actually easy it is using the free tools that are available, right? But that's probably for next week, especially that all those business features. So today we'll just try to look at the mobile features, plus we will start creating that new website with imported pages. So we will actually import whole pages that we will modify a little bit. We will add our own page and tweak the settings a little bit. Okay, so the first thing I would like to do, because I don't quite like this layout here, because if you remember, of course we have these sections in Elementor, right? And you can edit each section separately. So for example, this particular section is set to full width. So it actually spans the whole width of the screen, which perhaps doesn't look so good. Maybe if we made this font larger, that would work better. But I'm going to go to edit with Elementor because we want to edit the contents. And here, if you remember, of course, we have sections. So these are the widgets for the sections, right? You can add new sections, you can move them around, you can delete them, you can right click and you've got the options. Then you've got the columns, right? So these dark gray icons indicate the columns. So we have two columns and we have all these individual widgets, those elements. So for example, here we can edit the heading. So at this point, we're interested in the section settings because we want the section to have a certain layout. So you can see that in this layout tab, I've got content width and it's set to full width. And that's the reason why it spans the whole page. It basically runs across the whole screen. So I'm going to set it back to boxed because that's what it was originally. Of course, we can see that the font is messed up. So I'm going to also change the settings for this element, this widget, right? And in style, I can, of course, modify the font a little bit. So make it a little bit smaller. I can update, but if you want to view the site without updating, of course you can click this arrow. So it hides the panel, but it also displays everything the way it's going to look. So This seems to look okay. Right. Okay, so let's talk about mobile. So, of course, you normally design your website on a laptop or a desktop computer with a large screen. And of course, nowadays, it's important for each website to look good on any device, to be displayed properly on a phone, a tablet, right? And of course, you don't want your website to look the same on your desktop or laptop as on your phone, right? Because then you would have to just scroll or drag the page and make it larger. So of course, that's not ideal. But using WordPress, actually, this is very easy. Because by default, most, if not all, WordPress themes and WordPress in general is responsive. So we are talking about responsive layout, which means that the website or the web page will change, will adjust itself depending on the kind of screen that is displayed on the kind of resolution that is displayed on, screen size, and so on. So, usually, actually, you don't need to do anything. And it will look acceptable on most devices. However, you might want to make some adjustments if you're not happy with how it looks. So, in order to do that, you need to go down here. You've got these items. So the fourth one from the left, you can see this one says responsive mode, right? So when I click on this, I've got these choices. So I can choose between desktop, which is the current choice, tablet, and mobile. So if I click on the tablet here, you can see what happens. And of course, you can already see the problem, right? So actually, those font settings are not going to work because the layout gets adjusted. But since we set the font size to a rigid font size of a certain value, then, of course, when these columns get narrower, this is going to be a problem, right? If we go to mobile, you can see, again, same problem. So on the one hand, the image is now under the text, which is good, but we've got this problem with the text still, right? So what can we do about this? So one way to do something about this would be to try to set the text to certain units, like percentages, which would automatically adjust according to the size. But another way to do it is just to edit each view separately. So what does it mean? It means that we are now in the mobile view, right? So if I go to, for example, let's say I select this, I'm selecting this element, it is selected here. So if I go to typography, you can see that I've got this mobile icon here, right? So now I'm editing for a phone. So I'm editing the size for the phone, right? Because we are in this phone mode. And before we change anything, if I go back to desktop, to the desktop view, and I go to typography, right? You can see I've got this desktop icon here. So these are the settings for the desktop. So the settings for the desktop are basically the same as for the laptop. But if I just want to change this property for, let's say, the phone, I don't want to change everything. I just want to change this property for the phone. I can just select it here, right? And you can see that I'm switching. So actually, I was wrong. Switching this here does the same thing as switching it here. So everything is so we are in the mobile mode basically, right? So now I can adjust the size of the font, and I can decide, okay, I want this. Maybe I want the padding to be smaller, right? Because you can see that the font is a bit small, but we have this padding which we changed in the desktop view. So I need to go to advanced, I think. And yes, and nothing shows up here because we did not change anything specifically for the mobile view. So it just inherits the settings for the desktop view. I think that's how it works because you can't see any settings here. But we have the padding clearly, right? So now we need to adjust it here, right? Manually. So maybe we want the padding to be a lot smaller, like 12 maybe. And we want the text size to be slightly bigger, something like this perhaps, right? And we might also decide that we want, for example, the text to be centered in the mobile view, right? Okay, so for example, we might change it to this centered view, right? So you can see that you can change all the settings for the different views, and you could change anything. You could even change colors if you decided that perhaps you want different colors or a different font on the mobile device because it would look nicer. So you can change anything, right? You can also see that the button, there's a problem with the button. Normally you don't have these problems if you just use a theme, because a theme is usually set up to work correctly on all the devices. But since we created everything from scratch, we just added those elements and just, changed those properties, not thinking about mobile devices, you can see that we've got these problems. So we need to fix them. We have to be aware of that because otherwise the website is going to look horrible on a phone or a tablet, right? So let's also change this button. And what we can do here is perhaps, I think, again, we need to make the padding smaller. Right, actually, I'm using the margin settings. That's not really what we should be doing here. So let me try to tweak the padding to make it, yeah, something like this. Right, so this is perhaps not the best way to work with it because I'm using padding to center the button. So that's not the best idea, but you get the point, you get the idea, right? We could try to tweak some other settings, like the border radius, for example, of the button. So for example, we might decide that on a mobile phone, this button should be rounded because maybe that looks nice. And maybe on a on a laptop or desktop computer, a square button would be nicer. Okay, so So we can switch to, let's update that. Right. So now if we switch back to desktop, you can see that this gets adjusted. So you can see that this button actually is rounded. And the reason for that is, so actually not all settings can be adjusted for individual devices separately. Only those that actually have this icon, right? I didn't think of that. So for example, we could change the padding individually for the phone and the desktop. However, there is no such icon for border radius. So border radius is only set, it's set for all the devices. There are no separate settings. This is a small limitation of Elementor. Of course, if you just worked with CSS, you would also be able to do that, because in CSS you can, you've got the so-called media queries where you set properties for individual screen widths and you can change anything. It doesn't matter what it is, right? Whether it's colors, whether it's border radius, fonts, and so on. So you can change anything there. But here they decided that you don't perhaps need to set everything separately. So they decided that border radius wasn't a thing that you should, change separately or set separately for individual devices. Maybe that will change in the future, who knows. But evidently we can't do that, which is not a huge problem, right? This is just something that, a small limitation of this system. Maybe if you could change everything, that would be a bit too complicated and, complex. But for many of the things, of course, you can see that you can change the margin, the padding separately. Let's change one more feature. Let's look at the tablet view, right? So of course we need to change this as well because it looks awful. So again, we need to change the typography and the size. You can see that there's no setting, so it just inherits from the desktop view, basically. So we can make it larger and also make the padding is inherited from the desktop view. So I'm going to just adjust it a little bit and make the font bigger. Okay, I might also want to make this maybe the top and the bottom padding. So I'm going to unlink this and just work on the bottom and the top, so that we have something that looks acceptable. Right, so maybe 50. Okay. Right. We might also decide that we want this tablet view to have a similar layout to the mobile view, and maybe this website title should span the whole width, right? So of course we can do that by changing the column settings, right? And we can decide that we want the column width to be, and you can see that this happens. So right, so we might decide, okay, that's what we want for our so we've got 100%, right? We might also do something about this image, or maybe add another column or something like that. Of course you shouldn't overdo it, because then you might lose track of all those changes and might get a little complicated. But you see the possibilities, right? You should always look at those mobile views after setting up your website, especially if you're actually creating it from scratch. If you just import a website and make a few small changes, but basically preserve the structure, then usually that website will be responsive. So later we will import this kind of website basically, and then we shouldn't really have to worry about those mobile views. I mean, we can preview them just to make sure that they look okay, but everything should work fine. You can also decide that you want to hide certain elements in a given view. For example, you might not want to display all elements on a phone. So how do we do that? So let me go to the mobile view, right? So you can of course scroll down and you can see that we've got all the elements stacked on top of each other vertically for the mobile view. Right, but you might want to decide that, for example, in the mobile view, you don't need this image because you've got this image or this gallery. So maybe we don't want another image below, right? We just want the text. So we select the element and we go to advanced, I think. And you can see this section here, responsive layout. And you can select hide on mobile, right? And you can see that this is kind of grayed out. So you know it's there, but it's just not shown here in this view, right? So if you want to actually view this website, you want to see how it's going to look. Of course, you can hide this panel, and now you can see that we have no image here. So that way you can decide which elements should not be displayed on a given device. Okay, so now we're going to delete this page, this website. So we're going to destroy our work. That's just life. So let's move on. So I'm going to, actually I forgot about one thing. I was going to set this page as the default page first, as the home page, because if we go to, so I'm going to update and I'm going to exit to dashboard. You could also view page, but we want to see the default, the home page for the website. So I'm going to exit to dashboard and click here and visit site. So again, we have this default WordPress page. So we need to go to customize. So this is the customize menu of WordPress. Right, so of course this page is displayed. So we need to go to homepage settings. Yeah, so here we've got an important setting. We want, usually you want a static page, not posts, unless you're actually running a blog. And of course here we can select the home page, and since there's only one actual page created, this will be it, right? And it's displayed here. Okay, so let's publish that. And you can see also, if I just go to the main page again, this is what is displayed. And that's what we want. But of course, as I said, we're going to destroy our work again. So I'm going to go to the dashboard. And I'm going to go to pages. And I'm going to delete it. So I can do it, I can just click bin here. Right, so it's in the bin. Okay, so let me also get rid of the plugins, because we're going to start a completely new website from scratch. So we've got these two plugins, and actually we're going to need them. But just as a matter of good practice, when you start a new project, when you start a new website in WordPress, also after installing WordPress, you usually have a few plugins installed by the hosting provider. So it's a good idea to get rid of all the pages, all the plugins, and then just start from scratch. So let's first deactivate. And now we can delete. Right. Another thing you should usually look at when starting a website is in the settings, you've got these permalinks. And usually the best type of setting here is post name. So again, this name comes from the time when WordPress was primarily a blogging service, a blogging solution. So usually you had posts which had their own pages, and the name of the page was the post name, right? So this is about what shows up here in the address bar, right? Because what we want to display is the name of the page. We don't want any dates or any numeric values or things like that, or some strange numbers. We have this custom structure, so we can also customize it if we know how to do it. But usually this post name is the best setting for a regular website. Because what you want to see is, if you're on the home page, you just want the name of the website. For example, englishservices.com. If you're on the contact page, you want englishservices/contact.html, for example, right? You don't want any other strange numbers or symbols, right? So usually this setting is best for a regular website. Okay, so save changes. Of course, there are some other settings. We looked at some of the other settings before, so you might always want to look at this, at the date format, time format, the first day of the week, and things like that. Email address, of course, very important. But let's go back to the dashboard. So obviously we have no pages. We have no... you might also have to delete any media left from previous installations. So if you have some media, like I do here, it's also a good idea. I've switched to the list view because then I'll be able to... so you click here to go to the list view, because in this thumbnail view, you won't be able to... I mean, you can select the items, but... just close that. You can bulk select. You can click bulk select and just keep selecting. But if you have a lot of these, Of course, that's not the best idea. So it's best to go to the list view and just select everything here. Right? So I'm also going to delete these images and other media. Okay, so delete permanently. Because we want to have, if we're starting a new website, we don't want to have these items from the previous website, unless there are some specific images that we want to reuse. All right, so we're going to install another theme, as you might expect. So let's go to Appearance, Themes, and Add New. And the theme is called Astra. So let's install it. And activate it. Right? So we can go directly to Customize, and we'll also have a preview. But you can see that you've got this default blog page. And here in the settings, you don't see the homepage settings. Right? So we would probably first need to create a few pages and then try to set the homepage somehow. However, we're going to import some templates anyway, so we don't have to worry about that. You can see that depending on the theme, these items are different. So, for example, this theme has fewer settings, or at least fewer visible items than the previous one. If you go into the individual items, of course, you've got more settings, so you can check it out. At the bottom here, you can also see that in this Customize menu, you also have these responsive icons. So you can have the mobile views as well. So if you click on that, you can see that by default, these sites are customized for individual devices, right? Of course, this doesn't look perfect because we've got this scroll bar here. So that's why these icons are slightly cut off, right? But anyway, these are the icons for editing. So you can just edit these individual items in each view, similarly to how we select items in Elementor. But that's not something we're going to deal with now. What we want to do is to install a plugin Add New, which is called Astra Starter Sites. Right? So it's a plugin connected with this theme, right? Probably developed by the same people. But anyway, they give you some starter templates using different page builders. And one of those is Elementor. So you can actually use different page builders with this with these templates, right? So that's installed. Let's activate that. Okay, so that's our only plugin at the moment. Of course, later it will require us to install Elementor, or actually it will install Elementor on its own because it needs it once we select this page builder to create those websites. Okay, so you can see that we've got this option here, C library. Right, and here we select our page builder. So we're going to use Elementor. There are other options, but Elementor is currently the most popular one and arguably the best. Right, and here we can actually import whole websites that we can later customize to our needs. So you can of course select any one of these that you like, even if the content is different from what you're going to actually have on your website. So we have this organic store here, and that doesn't mean that we're going to make a website selling organic stuff, right? We could just use this to perhaps sell something else, or maybe even not sell anything, just have some kind of content after customizing the website. Okay, so let's select this one. It looks interesting. You can see that you've got page templates. So you've got 3 basic pages: home, about, and contact. Right? Of course, this will depend on the website. So here we've got 4 pages, for example. So it's always good to look at what they actually offer in terms of actual pages. You can see that most of these are pretty similar, right? So, okay, so I'm going to select this one and we'll see what we can do with it. So if we look here at the bottom, this is a bit obscured by this hosting provider's icon, but you've got import home template, so just the home, or import complete site, right? So we're going to import the complete site, and you've got some options here. Delete previously imported site. So we don't need to do that because we have no previously imported site. Actually, we have no site because we've deleted all the pages. You can disable any of these if you don't want those items, but in this case we're going to import everything, right? And you can see that some plugins are being installed that are needed by this plugin, and they are also being activated. Okay, so plugin WooCommerce installation failed for some reason. There has been an error on your website. We're going to look at that plugin later. So we don't necessarily need it now. However, if we're going to continue working on this website, perhaps we should try another one. Try installing another template and see if we get that same problem. Because we will be wanting to install that plugin later anyway. So if it clashes with, or if it doesn't work with a given template, that's not ideal. So let's look at what we could install instead. Okay, how about this one, Learn-Academy. So our website will offer some language services, so that's sort of appropriate. We won't have to change that much. Right, so we have 4 pages, we have pages about courses, so that might come in handy. Okay, so let's see how this is going to work. So import complete site. Okay, so right, so this template requires premium plugins. Right, so now we have another problem. We're not going to buy any plugins. So this particular template requires some paid plugins, right? So you can see that not every template will be ready to use for free immediately. So you just have to look around. There are lots of them. So let's look for something different. Right, let's perhaps try this one. Just 3 pages. Travel agency, perhaps. Okay, and we have quite a few pages here. But here we've got get agency bundle, so that looks suspicious. Right. Okay, so again, you just have to be patient and look for something that's going to be free and without errors. Right, what about this one? Just 1 page. I wanted something with a few pages. Health coach. Okay. Looks interesting. But again, we have this bundle. I know this one should work because I've tried it, but I thought we might want to try something else. Painter. Maybe too artistic for our purposes now. How about this one? Import complete site. Okay, and we actually want to delete the previously imported site. Right, because we don't want any previous data to linger on our server. Okay, and the other settings are also selected, and we're going to try and import that. Oops, that's strange. So it actually worked yesterday, this WooCommerce. So this WooCommerce plugin seems to cause some issues today. I'm going to give it one more try with this theme, which did work. But I think there might be some temporary issues with that plugin, maybe with the server. Okay, so again, we want to delete the previous site and import. So a lot of these will require WooCommerce because this is a plugin that is used when you want to, you can see that we've got the same problem. So this plugin is used when you want to basically have a shop, an online shop, online store. So it's got all the functionality, like the payment methods and the, what's the word for that? Okay, so I think I know what the problem might be. I will try to install it manually, but I think that might also fail. So let's go to plugins. Let's look at the installed plugins first. Right, so we don't have this WooCommerce plugin here. So let's try to add a new plugin. Type in Woo, and we should get WooCommerce as the first result. And let's try installing it from here. Right, so that's just as I thought. The problem is the fact that we're using a free hosting service that probably doesn't have the necessary safety features. So, and I'm not talking about the SSL certificate, because that's another thing, because I have tried installing this plugin on my paid hosting service where I don't have this SSL certificate. So we're talking about this thing. So actually the funny thing is that this free service has the certificate, so you can see this message connection is secure, right? But on my paid hosting service, I don't have it. I didn't buy it, and they don't offer it for free. And I don't need it at the moment. Still, I was able to actually install this plugin. So it's probably connected with some other features, safety features of this web hosting service. So we won't be able to install it here. But that's not a big problem for now, because we're just going to look at the website. And next time we will perhaps look at some of the features available in this plugin on a different hosting service. Okay, so we will actually select that template that I originally wanted to select, because this WooCommerce plugin isn't going to work anyway. So we could go back to plugins, but we can also go to appearance, and we can see some new items here. For example, starter templates. So we can go directly to the templates from this menu here. From appearance, starter templates. We've got some other options here, like header and footer blocks, Astra options. So let's go to starter templates, and let's select that template that we originally wanted to select. Okay, so import complete site, delete previously imported site, and import. Right, so of course this plugin will not get installed. But hopefully our template has been installed. So let's just look at the pages, see if we've got any pages there. No. Right. Okay, so we've got to try to install another one. So let's go to appearance. So you can see free hosting is not really the solution if you want to fully use the potential of all these features. All or most of these features are free, but actually, if you want to have a reliable service that supports all the features, then you should get some proper hosting. Okay, so let's go to appearance again, starter templates. Okay, and let's look at, I know this one should work, as I said, but it's missing some images, and I think we can find something more interesting. So let's try this one again. So we've got 4 pages here, and let's see if we can just import it without that plugin. I'm sorry, that's the one with the commercial plugins required. Right, so let's see something which doesn't look too business-like, right? Because we don't want that plugin. So let's see. Most of these actually look like business sites, meaning that they offer some services. Okay, let's try this one. Maybe this is some kind of non-profit. We've got a donation plugin. Maybe it'll be possible to install it on this service. You can see this WP Forms plugin, very popular. So you can see that some content is being imported now. Okay, so it seems to have been completed. We can view the site. Right, so you can see that we've got this new homepage. And when we click on the links here, we've got our pages. Right, of course, this is all an imaginary organization. You can see that you've got this lorem ipsum content, this dummy text. Right, so this is good, of course, for any such organization that wants to have a ready-made website that they can customize. And we have the contact page and the form and map, right? So a simple site. Right, so we won't be able to explore business functionality here, but we have a lot of other things which we can explore. So let's start by customizing a few things. So let's go to the Customize menu. Okay, so you can see that when I hover my mouse over the elements, or at least some of them, I've got this editing icon. So then I can go directly to that menu, to those settings. But let's start by adjusting a few things. So we're not going to change the theme or the topic of the website. We're just going to tweak a few things. For example, we can correct the grammatical error here. So we need to go to the header area, site identity, right? You can see that you can change the logo here. So that's what we have already done before, right? There is no site icon, right? So this little icon here in the tab. So we've got this media library, which already has all these images that have been imported. So we can select this one, which of course is too large. Ideally, you should scale it down to something like 16 by 16 or 28 or 32 by 32. But we won't worry about that now. So let's just skip cropping here. Okay, and you can see we've got it here at the top. Okay, so let's correct that error. So we've got the primary header, I think. Right, so you can see that on a mobile device it looks different. So by default, all these websites are responsive, so they look differently on different devices, right? Okay, but we're looking for that text. Right. By the way, if you go to typography here in the global settings, because of course you can edit those items, those widgets, those areas individually and change the fonts and so on. But if you want to have like the base font for the whole site, right? So that's the font that the whole site will have unless you change something. So base typography, right? And you've got this font here. So you've got some settings here. And usually you have to experiment because, for example, if you're using Elementor, of course Elementor has its settings, but I think most of these settings will override the Elementor settings. So you just have to experiment with that. So let's see what is being changed when we actually change the font here. So it seems that the menu items have changed, and probably the paragraph text. So this is something that changes. This is the default font, the base font. Let's try something a little more interesting. Right, that's perhaps not quite appropriate. Right, this looks pretty nice. I think there is a separate setting for headings, right? So you have this font family here. Right, so this changes the font of the header, right? So this is all controlled by the theme, right? That's how they arranged it, right? So yeah, but in order to actually change the text, we will probably have to go to the Elementor. Okay, so let's publish that because I think this looks reasonable. And let's go back. Right, so I don't see any other settings here which would actually allow us to change the text. You can see at the top, we've got this option here, edit with Elementor. Okay, and now we have full control. As soon as this gets loaded. Okay, so let's correct the grammatical error. Right. Okay, and since we have a shorter word, we can we want this for to go to the next line, so maybe we'll just make the font a little bit bigger. Right, and there's a default setting. Which might be controlled by the theme or maybe by the template. I'm not sure, because you can see that if this slider is basically at 0 and there's no value, that means that that's a default setting. So that default setting has to be somewhere. So we could look for that default setting and change it, or just change it here, because I don't know if there will be any other similar headings. And anyway, we really just want to change this one because we want this for to move to the next line. We could also change the width of this column, of course, but let's just make the font a little bit bigger. Right, so we can actually make it quite big at this point. Okay, we can update. But of course, since we've changed this, let's also see what it looks like on mobile devices. And this is looking okay. So basically the tablet version is just, it's similar to the desktop, but you will see one difference here is this menu. And this is often a solution for mobile devices, right? Instead of having, especially if you have a long menu, if you have quite a lot of items, and you don't have, enough space here, it's a good idea to have this, it's called a hamburger menu, because you've got these, this kind of resembles a hamburger. Okay, so if you click on that, of course, you've got the menu. So this is how it looks on a tablet, and the text still looks okay. Let's see on a phone, and that's still okay, right? So you can see that this is working nicely. Okay, we might want to change this background. I think it's too dark, too dim, too gloomy. So when we click on this area, on this section actually, we can of course work with the style, and we've got this background image that we can modify. And you can see that we've got these icons. So these are the things that can be changed for the individual devices. So you could, for example, have a different image on your phone if you decided that that's, or maybe you might decide, because of course the layout is slightly different on the mobile phone. You might decide that perhaps the positioning should be different, right? So if we look at, let me just change to a phone, you can see that, well, you might decide that maybe you want to see more of that lion, right? So then you would just customize these settings a little bit, perhaps. Right, you might also have another version of the image, for example, a more vertical version. You might cut off part of the image and use it for your mobile device. So you would have a different because you can see you've got this icon here, which means you can actually have a different image for your mobile device, right? So you might decide that maybe on a mobile device you want to have an elephant for some reason, right? And that's very dark. So of course you might also want to change the overlay, right? Because of course the reason that this image is so dark is because there is this black overlay with an opacity, so that's basically transparency, of 0.7, right? So if I drag it down, it becomes a lot brighter. So I think something like, so with this elephant, actually zero opacity, so basically completely transparent, overlay. So basically no overlay would perhaps work, or just a little bit, just to make the text a little more visible. Right, so let's see. Right, so you can see that here we've got this lion. However, the opacity, because the opacity is not cannot be adjusted for individual devices, right? So we have to stick with this opacity, right? So for this with this image, it might be too bright, so we might need to tone it down. So you can think of different ways of fixing this. You could try another image. So let's actually get that elephant image, because I think it's quite nice. Let's see how it works here. Hasn't changed because I used okay, so I used the image for the overlay. So let's just scrap it, and we want the background image, not the overlay image. So yes, so let's get that elephant. Right, and that doesn't look that bad, I think. Right, so we might decide on how it's scaled. Right, and if we look at the tablet view, yeah, so it just inherited, because by default the tablet and mobile views inherited from the desktop view. So since we changed the desktop, the tablet changed as well, and we changed the mobile separately before. So yeah, I think if we are able to move this elephant a little to the right, that would be nice. I'm not quite sure how these work. Okay, bottom left. Yes, so you don't have full control like in CSS. So you can't specify the pixels, I think, unless you use some custom CSS. But you can always just, you could just adjust the image. Basically, you might cut off an area or something. Okay, so let's leave it at that for now. Okay, so that's all we have time for today. So let me switch back to the desktop view. And let's actually, so let's hide the panel so that we can see what it looks like. Okay, so next time we will try to adjust this page a little more. We will add a new page and try to style it so that it matches the look of the rest of the website. And we will also try to introduce some of that business functionality. So we will probably need to work with a different hosting account.